Okay, so I live in a relatively small city in North Carolina and started working at the young age of 14 as a dishwasher, soon working my way up through the restaurant over 2 years. Settle in because this is a long one and I hope you all enjoy it. The original owner of the restaurant/bar, a 50-plus-year-old woman, had grown interest in selling the restaurant after 10 years of great reviews, and honestly it became the best place in town to go to. A younger male walked in one day through the kitchen door. In the start I thought he was a new employee. Finding out later that night, he was the one interested in buying the restaurant, and the sell went smoothly. Fast forward a year, and the new owner, let's call him Herb, denied the only time I had ever asked for a raise. The $7.50 an hour I started on was not a living wage. He told me I didn't work hard enough when I had gone as far as to wait on tables and cook, as well as many of the cleanup, maintenance, on top of my job of being their dishwasher. Thankfully for me at the time, my manager, who had listened through the office door, called him out on the bullshit. She got me my raise. Nonetheless, a few months into it, Herb let several coolers which held meat break down and refused to fix them or get a new one. My nice manager couldn't take getting the backlash of always being blamed for things breaking down. Herb's the owner, it was his money. He had to approve anything we did. So on the night we celebrated her 10-year anniversary of working there, she ate the cake my sister and I made her, then also proceeded to quit on the spot right after. The responsibility of management fell onto my sister, and she was forced to take the promotion with no raise or anything. She managed for 9 months, only to feel unheard. For any issue she brought up with equipment or workers, she would always be told, "No, we cannot do that." And after she had had enough trying to convince him on repairs, we were left without a manager for a period of time, and he was forced to drive the 3 hours to come and manage the restaurant himself. A few weeks after, a new manager was hired, and another man was hired to be my help in the kitchen, and me being the head cook at this point in time, I taught him the ups and downs of the kitchen, and this man, he was kind and caring at first, but he kissed ass so much that I'd always overlooked for the kitchen manager position. The guy I loved to watch football with in the kitchen on my phone, using my speaker on the slow Sundays, changed into a brutal asshat. He would cuss at the waitresses and try to physically fight me on the daily. He and I were there to open the kitchen alone, and would be joined by wait staff an hour later. He went as far as to buck up to try to fight one of the waitresses one day. When she mentioned she had heard everything he said to me before she walked in, "I am done with your shit. You can either apologize or you can get the fuck out. OP has been here a lot longer than you, and you were trained by him, and yet you think you can disrespect him." No. As the man raised his hand to try to smack her, I punched him in his face, and in return got slammed into the already broken coolers. You do not hit a woman, EVR. Fast forward a few months later, and after when he sees this side of him, they realize I wasn't playing about him being the great a dick. Many of us had tried to tell Herb about his actions, but were met with, "It can't be that bad. He's so nice." Finally, after not being heard or listened to for so long, I began planning how to quit. I had it all planned out, and when we had the meeting, I walked in a suit, already having found a place with, at that time, my fiancée, and a new job far from home. Everyone knew I was overdressed and had questions, and I filled them in on the walkout plan. Yet the mean manager was nowhere in sight. After enjoying the meeting and being called on for my opinions on how to boost sales and better the restaurant, I looked at Herb and answered sarcastically, "Oh me. Now you want to hear what I have to say." Getting in a serious tone now, I stand up and told him why would I help a business, much less the owner of this business, better themselves when I have been blown off for months. Anything I had to tell you. I was bullied for months, and when I mentioned it, I was brushed off. Have a great fucking day, Herb, because you quite literally don't have a cook now. Today is moving day, and I am moving over 4 hours away to a better job. one with an owner who will listen and respect their workers, and not force us to try and cook green. Slime my chicken past, etis expiration date, IQ8. He begged for me to stay because he had finally fired the mean manager. He said, "Is there any possible way I can get you to stay?" I looked at him and repeated the words he always told us when we mentioned equipment needed repaired or replaced, in his exact customer support accent. "No, we can't do that." As I walked out, he followed, begging me to stay, and said he finally did what was needed of him. I simply told him, "Too little, too late," and proceeded to walk out. And what followed was all the coworkers on my side stood up and left too. This is not where it ends. He had purposefully not given me my O2 forms for taxes, and after a few days of harassing him for my tax papers, I got them. Then, I received a letter from the IRS saying there was a problem with my tax forms, therefore I couldn't receive my tax refund. Calling up the IRS, I found he had not submitted any of the forms he was supposed to as our employer, and when contacting him to rectify the situation, he proceeded to say, "Mom, I don't recall employing any of you this year, after all you all left with no reason or right." Little did he know I record every conversation on my phone, and I reported him to the IRS. Attached to the email, I sent in the voice recording in an MP3 format, and I also sent in photocopies of my check stubs and copies of my V2s, along with informing my coworkers having issues with their taxes to do the same. Herb has since lost his business license. His wife left him and took their kids after finding out about his fraud. Herb is now facing upwards to 60 years in prison now for multiple counts of tax fraud. It turns out we were not the only business he owned and refused to pay taxes or file the correct tax forms when needed. He had DUITHASHELD the safety precaution pay during COVID and used all of it to fix the restaurant. He fucked up, and I get to sit back happily typing this with a smile, knowing this dickhead got what was coming to him. For all of you wondering whether I ever got my taxes and my money, yes, I finally did as of yesterday.
Next story.
Many years ago, I worked at an automotive repair shop that was owned by a very nasty person. This person actually had 2 shops that he ran, and the best way I can describe him was as a tyrant. Both shops had cameras, and he would watch us work from the comfort of his home. If he saw something he didn't like, such as taking a 5-minute smoke break, or not sweeping for half a minute during downtime, or if he just wanted to bust balls, he would call the shop and harass us, or better yet, at times, show up and harass us in person. In addition, he would regularly berate us for no reason, threaten to not pay us because the shops weren't busy, and would have an absolute meltdown if you dared question his authority. It was spectacular in the worst of ways. After working for him for a few months and dealing with his shenanigans and getting sick of pointless arguments with him, I started reconsidering my employment there. Around the same time, the owner decided to move me from one shop to the other, really for no reason other than likely to try push me out, as that was what he did with the few people that I had already worked with. Odd coincidence being that I had not discussed my thoughts of leaving with anyone, but I digress. I genuinely disliked the idea of working at this other shop. It was older and a bit run down, plus it was in a pretty terrible area with high crime. But I wanted to line something up elsewhere before I jumped ship, so I made the move. This is where the beginning of the end started for all Mr. Owner. Once I got settled into the new shop, I got to talking with my fellow technicians. As it turns out, the owner was unsurprisingly a racist scumbag, and every single one of the employees at this location, aside from me, was African American. I'll spare you the details, but let's just say it's a miracle that the owner came into the shop, said what he said, and walked out breathing. In addition, he would regularly send people home with no pay for the day just to be an ass. This went on for a few weeks, him coming by, being nasty to all of us, and I was over it, and was just about to leave as I had lined up other employment. The other techs were also over it. I went to give the owner my 2-week notice via phone, discreetly, which I should have known wasn't a great idea, and instead of discussing it like a human, he decided to come down and talk face to face. Well, our friend was so incensed that I put my notice in that he forced me to clock out and go home, and also forced 2 other techs who decided to stand up for me to do the same. I decided that I had enough of this guy's shit, and that not only did he deserve to have some kind of reciprocation against him, but the other techs deserved better than to continually being walked on. So I filed a complaint with the Department of Labor and outlined everything. Within a few days they had launched an investigation, and of course the owner found out who filed the complaint and called the shop and gave me hell about it, stupidly, because the phones he had were on recorded lines. Guess who I had requested to listen to that conversation? In the end, I was terminated by him prior to my 2 weeks being up, as were the 2 techs who stood behind me. I filed for unemployment, which he fought me on by filing appeals with a judge, then not showing up 3 times in a row. This prompted the judge to bar him from requesting appeals against me and granting me full unemployment pay. Months later, I got a written letter from him extending an apology and offer to work for him again. 2 months later, I got a letter from the DOL saying that the investigation was closed and that he had been found guilty of multiple charges and was barred from operating a shop or any other business in the state for several years.
Next story.
New info: we bought Apple AirTags, $29.99 each, so not bad at all. And now have an alert set if they exceed 15 miles an hour. It has a built-in speaker and GPS tracking. Even if this idiot removes their collar, he won't realize the collars are being tracked. I have a fast car. I'd be behind him so fast it would make his head spin. First of all, before I start him, about 80% these 2 are involved with each other in romantic way. But I can't confirm. Now, I'm not an expert writer, nor am I going to spend an extended period of time making sure everything is perfect. I did a once or twice over, but there's just so much, and I'm still a little frazzled by today's situation. I've had difficulty putting my thoughts on paper since elementary. This doesn't mean I won't do my best. I'm sure there's run-on sentences and improper spelling. I don't think this is a prerequisite for sharing your experience. So I travel a lot, and I live in an RV mostly full-time. I've stayed at the same park, however, for the last 9 months. I've had issues here. They have called the police on me for arguing. Not joking. They will ignore me in the office. All because there was a small mistake on the paperwork. When I stayed here on an overnight 9 months ago, something happened, and they tried to use that to kick me out. However, the owner said it didn't matter, and all info is pulled from the registration, so blaming the paperwork for being off by 1 year on the RV as a cause for eviction was far-fetched. There was a few other incidents, but I just figured it's cheap here, and I can pay my rent over the phone. Who cares? And don't really plan on going anywhere, as where I am all the parks are full for snowbird season, plus I got a new job here. Anyways, we had a neighbor who was miserable. We could tell from day one. We also have 2 cats. They hang out on our porch mostly all the time. Occasionally they stray, but they're older and don't go far. So around 6 weeks ago, after 9 months of being my neighbor and never saying a word, he started acting very erratic. Randomly approached my wife as she was washing the car outside and got in her face and started screaming, saying that he dug cat poop out of the dirt behind his 1979 bus on bricks, and now he was going to put traps out and poison. Somehow management had heard the commotion, or he had told them to come, but they pulled up and quickly pulled him to the side to talk to him privately, refusing to even listen to us. We were very weirded out, calling him baby, sweetheart, etc. So they said it's his space, he can trap all he wants. If your animals are going onto his property, then that's your fault. Now this park is known to have so many cats they keep feeders by the front office. I warned them what they were doing was illegal, but they said, "We've been doing this a long time, we know exactly what we're doing. Call animal control if you don't believe me." I said okay, but he threatened to poison them, so I am making a police report. In case anything happens, I want him to be on record as having threatened them. They came, took the report, and oh man, did that make him mad. Still at this point, I hadn't figured out how to get my revenge. Animal control said it was legal and didn't do anything. We immediately got the cats microchipped and went to Lowe's to buy cat traps to teach our cats what a trap is and how to not go into one. Easiest trick I've ever taught an animal. Took one try now. They're terrified of anything resembling a trap. We were stumped. The cats were going stir crazy. Then 5 days later, she leaves a letter on my door. A self-help eviction, saying I have no choice but to leave immediately, and she was turning off the power on X day. I told her if she did, I would call the local police, as that's a self-help eviction, and you've already demonstrated malice by calling the police on me for asking you a question you don't like. Assisting in the trapping of my cats while encouraging other cats to stay. Self-help evicting. And at one point, she refused my CDC declaration letter, and I have all these things recorded on video. On top of all this, she says he needs to start his Harley and let it run for 45 minutes to warm up, even if he's not riding. That's what Harleys need, 2 feet from my bedroom window, and he knows I work nights and I'm asleep, essentially trying to force me out. Saying my dummy camera isn't allowed, however, his real camera pointed at my space is. I was very prepared for an eviction threat, as these guys get away with so much being that they can threaten eviction, and people will just roll out in their RVs. Not me. No, not me. After the manager finally spoke to the owner, she realized she had dug herself into a hole, and now couldn't evict me unless I had not paid rent, as they had refused to show me a contract or any rules the entire time I've been here. They don't like to have written rules, so they can change them as they need. The manager told me I was never allowed into the office unless to get mail, and I must pay rent over the phone with a card. Still, though, I wasn't comfortable, because my neighbor had now put out around 4 different traps, some as close as 1 foot from my property line. He still hadn't caught anything. So by chance I ran into a property manager while out shopping for my own trap, and he told me some interesting things. I did a little research and found out that trapping in Nevada is illegal without a permit. Too many protected species. So I knew the cats would never go into a trap. We did about 5 sessions with them, and they got to the point when they even saw the trap, they'd just hide. So I told the landlord it's fine, he can keep the traps. I had heard from a neighbor that he saw the manager opening up the storage room and loading his truck with animal traps. But he didn't know about our situation, so he was confused. This is when I put my plan together. I knew the longer he saw he wasn't getting his way, the more traps he would put out, and the more erratic he would become. He started revving his Harley for 45 minutes about 3 times a day, while sitting inside with the radio on blasting. Then he'd get a chop saw and cut lumber into as small of pieces as he could, and then stand 10 feet back and launch them into a steel trailer. I had around 2 GB of video from my cell phone, so I only actually caught about half of it. I knew he was losing it. I put a dummy camera facing his front door, and that's what did it. He got too close and pushed my wife on camera. I had successfully driven him nuts and had what I needed for a civil harassment suit, and I just let him stew. Every few days I'd notice a new trap. Finally, when he got up to 14 traps, his tiny RV space looked like a landmine of cat traps. My cats were and probably are still traumatized from the sight. My next move was to call the Nevada Fish and Wildlife. I emailed the picture of the traps. They finally showed up today and found his 14 traps. The fine is $1,000 per trap. These people also are cops that don't get to ever bust anyone, so they took it very seriously. They confiscated his traps and hit the park with 14 fines. Afterwards, she called me asking me why would I do that. I informed her I'm not done, and that I'm building a case on her and her little friend for harassment. I've since been moved to one of the best spots on the property near the $1 million RVS next to the pool and hot tub with a bar and pizza about a 200 feet walk, and yes, I BGGD for a new spot to end this from day one. But she said, we're booked up full all winter, we won't have even one spot until after Christmas.